The Surrealist movement is so male-dominated and weird.
Welcome to The Love of Art, the Perrotin podcast. Here, artists speak about other artists that fascinate them. Musicians, writers, filmmakers, actors, designers, in a very personal way. We believe that art belongs to everyone. As French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu wrote in L'amour de l'art, culture is not a privilege bestowed by nature. If everyone had the means to obtain it, it would belong to everyone. Klara Kristalova constructs an odd yet familiar world, inhabited by figures evoking rawness, vulnerability, and humanity. The landscape, though not directly represented, is an essential component of Klara Kristalova's universe, inferred in fragments from the drawings, ceramics, and bronzes that populate the exhibitions she has unveiled in recent years. In this episode, she talks about several Surrealist women. Enjoy!
I was born in Prague, in Czech, and my parents moved to Sweden when I was 1 year old. So in the beginning in Sweden, they were moving around a lot. We were living in many different places. And then when I was 6, my mother died accidentally, suddenly, and we moved again and again. My father and mother were artists, both of them. So I grew up in an artist home. My mother was painting and doing ceramics in our home. And my father was a sculptor. He was doing big wooden sculptures. And they had a big art library. And that's what I mainly remember I was doing, kind of lying on the floor looking in art books all my early childhood. I have very strong impressions from these art books and the images in them. And I kind of look at it like my art education, because I got a very tight bond to all these images, and I wasn't schooled into art history in the academical way. I was schooled in art history in a very intuitive way, so it's a totally different way. I didn't plan to be an artist at all, because I saw my father struggle with money issues, and he was working double as... I made a long travel in US, and then when I came home, I really didn't know what to do. And then my father was again, maybe you should become an artist. And then I was really tired and didn't know what I wanted to do. I was 20 years old or something. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a try. So, and then he educated me in his studio, because he had a very big studio at our home in the countryside, outside Norrtälje in Sweden. And he taught me how to draw life drawing. I mean, these classical things, and mixing colors and so, because he decided that I would be a painter, because he was the sculptor in the family and the old painter was gone. So my place was the painter, and I didn't even think about it. I was like, yes, okay, I can be the painter. And then I applied for the art academy, and the first time I tried, they took me, which was a sensation for me. I was shocked, wow. But when I started the art academy in Stockholm, they had different heroes than my father had. So the perspective was different, because for example, I remember minimalism was super important during that period in the academy. And we didn't look so much at minimalism in my home at all. So that was very new for me, and it changed me a lot, because I had to think more on my own. I was so taught by my father. And not that I was willingless, but he had very strong opinions, what was important and so on. And my references were probably very classical and like a mix from classical art and from modernism with the rules and things. But I think I really tried to liberate myself from my father's way. I changed a lot when my father died. I got free, kind of. It was very sad, of course, and he was a very strong supporter of me. He was the one I could always discuss with and so, but I also fought with him all the time. So when all his like ideas and restrictions disappeared, I was totally free, and it was like, what should I do now? It was a very strong feeling. And then I started to do kind of the painted ceramic, because it was also, when I was in the academy, I always liked to model things. And my father said I was useless in practical things, so I couldn't do sculpture. But then I started to build things with my hands, and in the academy, ceramic was a forbidden material because it was hobby and like a female hobby thing. And of course pottery, which is a totally different like direction. But and I was like, no, I'm gonna go into the ceramic because then I will have my own space. And it was this kind of a feeling of freedom. Ceramic has this very strong, you have to rely on chance, because you do it and then you fire it and you don't know what you're going to see when you open the kiln. It has a certain part is chance. If you're lucky, it's going to be good. If you are not lucky, it's going to be ugly and bad, and maybe that's good, you know. So the chance has a big part in it, which I really like. Louise Bourgeois was super important for me when I was in art school. And now maybe not so much, but still I have very many books of her work, and I think it's super interesting to look how her work developed from her early, more abstract work that's still very organic into like in the end with these fabric works and the installations with all the different types of materials that are very psychological, and the drawings that are also, they have a strong surrealistic feeling about them, especially the early drawings. And she was very important because it was a strong female artist that made this very like powerful psychological like installations about her childhood and her history. And that was like the opposite to this, that you should always be personal but never private. That was like the proof that was wrong, because how could you avoid being private? It's impossible if you want to say something important or something that has some sharpness in it, I think. At least that's the kind of work that interests me most. Later years, I have been looking at Leonora Carrington and Leonore Fini as well, and they are both also kind of surrealists or related to surrealists. I mean, not really surrealists, but related. And Leonora Carrington interests me because it has a lot to do with female life, but also about magic and alchemy and things. And this is very far from me because I'm very down to earth. But it's something in it that's also very, she totally trusts in her work. She's totally convinced it's important, and she goes on, weave on with these images that are very like complicated. And that's something I just don't do myself. I try to be simple and not take on too many subjects in the same work. In my shows, maybe it looks like I take any subject I can see, but but I don't. They are different like aspects of something that they have in common. But In her stories, I think they are like almost like fairy tales with very many chapters. They're like they are like in one painting. Very many things happen. You can see many details where different things play together, and so I have a very divided feeling towards her, and Leonore Fini even more because that's so seductive and female in a way, which I never have been. It's like a female image that I just don't even recognize. And it's very exotic and interesting. I tried to work with it a little bit, but it has been difficult. Because I grew up without my mother, it was complicated for me to kind of relate to how I should become a woman at all. Surrealism for me is like a way of telling stories, not necessarily with a intention to tell this story from beginning to end. It can be like very random stories that like in these images that one person draws one part and the second person continues. So the story develops randomly, but it's also about trusting chance and trusting your intuition and trusting your imagination, doing something from it that is definitely figurative. I work in the countryside outside, like 1 hour from Stockholm, in a studio where I have a big garden and I have dogs that run around, and I look at deer and wild boar in the woods. It's very important for me to live and work there because I listen to birds and look at bugs, and I kill snails, and I deal with the soil and plants, and this is super important for me because I don't know, that's like really a strong part of my life that I want to grow things. I want to do grow tomatoes and things, but it's hard for me to understand how taking care of the biodiversity in the world, how that has such a low importance for our economies, how that can go so far and just goes on, that no one cares about this, because it's like the baseline in our existence. And that's a big part in my work. It's impossible for me to imagine a work that would be just, light. I want them to be complex. Every tiny little drawing should be both.
We hope you enjoyed this discussion with Klara Kristalova. Please subscribe to our podcast channel and follow us on social media at Perrotin so you won't miss any episodes or news. See you soon with more artists on the love of art.